Hi, this is Vrinda. It seems that those of us who do not appear in the Epstein Files have been pushed into a long, empty, endless tunnel at the end of which there is hardly any light. The Department of Justice of the United States of America has released about 30 lakh documents, more than that. And there are photos and there are videos, about 14-15 hours of footage that has been released, that basically has been unleashed upon the world. And these documents are heavily redacted. The names of course, the victims should be protected, their identity, their faces, their names, their personal details should all be protected. But the names of the perpetrators, the criminals, the predators, the men and women who were participating in this horror show with Epstein, who were enjoying the fruits of his criminal nexus and of his network of sex trafficking, their identities have been so heavily protected that it is virtually impossible to ever get to a final conclusion about somebody's involvement. These files have made people like us, regular, ordinary citizens of the world, across continents, across countries, in different cities of the world, they have made all of us into this large body of global citizen police. All of us have been turned into these policemen, these digital policemen, who have been tasked now to sit in front of their laptops, to sit with their old desktops, with their systems on their mobile phones, and just try to get to the bottom of this large jigsaw puzzle, the parts of which are actually all of the parts of which are with the federal justice system of America. We people on the internet, on Twitter, on Instagram, on TikTok, on Discord, all kinds of social media websites have been turned into investigators. They are all just going through these documents and trying to either fill the gaps in these emails, these footages, these kind of footage and the images with either their most their best approximations, or with wild theories, or with some realistic arguments, because that's all you can do. You can only possibly provide some theories as to what is happening. At the same time, the entire trove of documents which are unredacted, which have actual statements made by people, all of that is sitting in the vaults of the Department of Justice of America. So the department, if it wanted, could have easily prosecuted, could have at least taken charge of the case and started investigations into the people who have appeared in these files, who are benefiting from the sex trafficking network that Epstein was running. But we see that none of that is happening. On the one hand, the identity of these perpetrators and these predators, these billionaires and these millionaires is protected so heavily, is guarded so thoroughly. But on the other hand, we have multiple victims whose identities have been revealed, whose identities were accidentally revealed in the documents that were released, and then those documents had to be redacted. We are also seeing instances when certain documents which might have been sensitive, which were probably deemed far too sensitive afterwards the release, were taken back by the department. So a department, the most powerful department, one of the most powerful departments in the world's most powerful democracy, in the world's most powerful country, is sitting on documents that can incriminate hundreds of people, hundreds of pedophiles, people who were trafficking minors, 11-year-old, 12-year-old girls. And even if they were above 18 years of age, it doesn't mean that they can get away with it. But it seems that they are. What these files basically do is that they just give us some hints. There is nothing in these files that can be held in a court of law and that can be used to accuse somebody to charge somebody with actual wrongdoing. We only have these hints, these possibilities of getting at somebody, but then it all falls short. There's nothing enough, it's never enough to actually bring somebody to justice. What we actually are expecting now is that the people that we think did all these crimes should come forward and confess to the crimes that they have committed. Because there's nothing else really left to do. The Department of Justice, if it wanted, could have acted upon this huge body of evidence, but it doesn't. Basically, only Ghislaine Maxwell is in jail, and the rest of them are participating in AI summits, are still heading governments, people whose involvement has been very sketchy, who appear thousands of times in these emails, walk freely, roam freely. I think it's also important to pay attention to the ways in which the women and children in this case, the victims of Epstein and his brigade of millionaire and billionaire friends and associates, how they appear in the files. And it's important because these are the people who are probably the closest to our larger lived reality. These are the people who walk the same roads as the rest of us. They live in the same kinds of homes that many of us live in. They are not the top 1% of the world, as Epstein was, as these other billionaires are. They are the ones who, on the one hand, are victims of Epstein's network and nexus of sexual exploitation, but they are also victims of an extremely unfair economic system that makes them vulnerable. Part of the design in Epstein's sex trafficking racket is that he always targets vulnerable girls, vulnerable children. Why are they vulnerable? They are vulnerable because they are economically dependent on a system that has refused to care for them. The language used for these women and children in these emails is so dehumanizing, and it's not, I feel that they have been erased from this conversation, not simply because of the redactions, but also in just the ways in which they are talked about in the emails. They appear as Russian blondes, they appear as Swedish girls, they appear as these Ukrainian beauties who are being exported and imported all across the world, who fly in these private jets that they can never in their lifetime ever imagine to lay a claim to. They are commodities, they are exchanged in this marketplace of billionaire men and in some cases women too. They are the currency through which these networks are forged and through which they flourish. The children appear just as 14-year-old girl, as a 7-year-old girl, as an 11-year-old girl, as a 12-year-old girl. They are faceless, they are nameless, they don't have identities. Ghislaine Maxwell, one of the main co-conspirators in this case, called the girls who were recruited and exploited trash. She said that they were worth trash. And I think that really tells us something about the psychology of this billionaire class that is on the other end of this extreme, that is the class that has been perpetrating and exploiting the bodies and the labor of all of these women and children. It tells us that to this class, this top 1% of the world probably, the rest of us, the rest of the world, the 99% of the world doesn't really matter. We are not part of their conception of what is to be preserved. We are either consumers or we are commodities to be exchanged between them. They do not share, at least they do not appear to share, the kinds of moral and ethical codes that are forced upon the rest of us. Be honest, virtues of honesty, modesty, of sharing, of peace, of being righteous, none of them seem to apply to them. These files reveal to us the limitations of our humanity and the expanse of theirs. We have been forced to confront and reckon with the fact that the world and its justice systems, its investigative agencies, all of these work along different principles when it comes to these people who seem to run the world. People across the world are demanding, governments across the world are demanding that these files should be released in full, that nothing should be left out. Even some of the accused, people whose names have appeared in the files, even they are saying that the files should be released in full. The identity of the victims can be protected, can be preserved. But the rest of us who are waiting for something to happen in this case have been making this same demand for years now, but nothing seems to happen. Independent media personnel, journalists, ordinary citizens who sit behind their laptops, they have unearthed more information from these redacted files than the most powerful department in the most powerful government's office has done. This case tells us not only that we do not really matter in the world of these billionaires and these millionaires, but also that the investigative agencies, that the governments that we elect, that the politicians that we choose to protect us can turn their backs upon us whenever it is convenient for them. The promise of citizenship, the promise of democracy, of faith in a social order that will stand to protect its most vulnerable people, really stands on very shaky, very shallow, very weak ground. This is Vrinda.